Hi, I'm Rosela Mosing. I'm a somatic-based whole life leadership and presence coach.
And I'm Ellen Palmer. I'm a regenerative leadership coach and strategic advisor for purpose-driven women. We're coaches.
And also friends. Welcome to the Presence Hour.
We have cleared this hour to become present to what is and invite you to join us in a lively conversation. We'll explore what is coming up for us and illustrate how cultivating presence can help us gain new insights, perspectives, and ways forward. Let's come together and take the mystery out of presence by getting ourselves there now.
Take a deep breath into your heart, and from here, we'll begin. Hi, Ellen.
Hello.
It's good to be here with you.
Hello, Rosela. Hi.
Welcome to everyone. It's good to be with all of you again this week as well. As per usual, I want to take a brief moment to just have a little mood check and see where we are. So I'll invite all of you to check in with yourselves as we do here. So how are you? What's going on? What's your mood right now, Ellen?
My mood. I'm checking in with myself because I feel like I don't have a certainty about what my mood is. I've been moving at the speed of light, I think, the last couple days, running right up until when we turned on this Zoom meeting to see each other. So I feel like, if I had to, I guess I don't know a word for this feeling, but I feel like if there was horses like in my chest and they all had ropes on them and they're all like kind of going in different directions, where I'm like, where am I headed? All these places, and all the horses are beautiful and everything seems, like I like all the directions, but I just feel like kind of like in lots of different pieces or directions, I guess.
Yeah, I love that metaphor. I'm not sure I know a word for that either.
Yeah.
But I think it's a really beautiful metaphor. It sounds like there's a little bit of joy or contentment and maybe a little bit of uncertainty or...
Yeah, and excitement. And at the same time, like a little tired, like a lot of things all kind of mixed up together. A little soup. I'm in a little emotional soup. Let's say.
Okay.
How about you?
I'm also noticing. So I'm noticing some body sensations. I want to label it as a little bit nervous. I feel a little unsure about where the conversation might take us, and a little. Yeah, there's some flittering and flip-flopping in my heart about wanting to show up well. And also I'm really wanting to lean into my curiosity. So yeah, that's what's alive with me right now.
Nice. I think I hear an airplane going by overhead over there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Is there one?
There's lawn guys, so I apologize.
Oh, there's lawn guys. It sounds like an airplane going overhead. That's okay. We're real people, real things happening in our world. It's springtime. Lawns are being mowed.
Yeah, so we're just going to, that's another thing. We'll just use our presence to notice and allow it to be here and just keep rolling. And hopefully you'll all keep rolling with us.
Yeah. So I'm just having this idea pop up, Rosela. Let's see what you think of this. What do you think if we all, including everyone listening right now, take 3 deep breaths in our own timing to kind of just like put our feet, feel our feet on the ground? Because if we're feeling kind of like this or that right now, maybe everyone listening could, benefit. I mean, I don't know whenever I could not benefit from 3 deep breaths.
Yeah, I agree. I'm also gonna really notice as I do my sits bones on my chair and, like you said, my feet on the floor, and just let myself really connect with my body as I take these deep breaths. So I'll invite everyone to do whatever of that feels supportive. And then we'll come back.
All right, let's do it. 3 deep breaths in your own time.
That was nice.
I feel like I took it down a couple of notches. I feel more like down in my body. I didn't realize that I felt a little bit more like up out of my chest and up out of my head, kind of. And now I feel more in my body. Did you feel any shifts?
Yeah, I do. I feel I can. So what I was labeling nervousness feels a little, there's still movement and life, and like it feels like soda in my chest a little bit, like seltzer water.
Yeah, I love that image.
And I feel more grounded, so it feels more fun now. Along with, there's still some uncertainty. There's still like, I don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah, well, let's dive into who knows what's going to happen. Let's dive into it. So if this is your first time listening, these are uncharted conversations. Rosela and I chat just briefly before we turn on the camera and start recording the podcast. But really, we don't know where it's going to go. And then at the end, stick around because there is always a guided visualization, meditation type of thing at the end. So... do you want to kick us off, Rosela, with what came up?
Yeah. So broadly speaking, I think it's always amazing to me how there's always so much overlap of what we are each encountering in our own separate journeys when we come back together. But there's a lot of questions about, the last time we talked about change and, taking on new, exciting challenges and opportunities. And so I think what we've both been noticing is as we do that, there's a lot more demand for your time and energy and attention, and navigating what to prioritize, how to decide that, where do you put your time and attention and energy, and how do you know that that's the right thing or the best thing? How do you make those decisions? And so that feels like, broadly speaking, what's been coming up.
Yeah. I've had several clients in the last couple of weeks talk about time and time management is how it's kind of like presenting itself. Mm-hmm. But really, it gets underneath that is the choices of how do they decide what to say no to is really the question they're asking. Yeah. But it's also, conversely, what do they say yes to?
Yeah.
And so that's about how are we spending our time? How do we make those decisions? And I often, just immediately relating it to presence mm-hmm. and how presence can support us in these situations is that we often are on automatic pilot and we're just mm-hmm. going throughout our day. I mean, that's the way human systems are set up. Is so, we make 34,000 decisions a day or something. And I read on the internet. And so most of those have to be automated in some way. And so it's like, how do you pull out the decisions that matter most? And then what do you orient to make sure you are putting your intention on those things? And Rosela, you had, I thought, a really good example. I don't know if you want to share your own example or if you want to talk in general how this is showing up for you.
Yeah, I'll talk more broadly first and then maybe some specific examples. But I think part of the trick or the trouble is that in deciding what matters most, how do you know? Mm-hmm. What are you orienting to? Right. And so that's a big part of the equation. And I've seen that part come up a lot. It's less, the questions that I'm seeing with my clients are less specifically about time management, although that's part of the equation. It's like, I'm not sure what I want, or I don't know how to know what is the best path, or I have all of these interests that all feel really like I really want to pursue them. Mm-hmm. And so I think, in my own experience, part of what I'm facing is that I'm having these opportunities to grow. And so for me, part of what's been helpful is that there's this overarching vision, for lack of a better word, that I'm orienting myself to. And it shapes itself and grows and becomes more clear over time as I take steps. So it started as this broad vision of, I want to be a masterful coach. Okay, so then the question becomes, well, what does that mean? Mm-hmm. And why does that matter to me? And so over the last 3 years of pursuing this path, I've had to come back again and again to, what does that mean? Why does that matter? What's important about that? And I know we talked a couple episodes back about values and purpose and how sometimes trying to orient to values can be difficult in helping you find the purpose. But I think once you for me, once I start to have a little clarity about where I think I want to go, it does come back to what is important and why. And that comes back to the values question. And so it's an iterative circle that you're in then. At least that's my experience and what I've seen with many clients is that then you start to think about not only why does this matter, what matters about this, what matters to me about how I want to show up. Like how am I what is the behavior of a masterful coach? Right. And so then that starts to shape, okay, so now there are two paths in front of me that I want to say yes to, both of them. And there's some conflict between them that would mean that I very likely will have to say no to one. So then how do I start to begin to assess, okay, well, if I think about what do I need right now in this moment, what's the next step in my growth to become that masterful coach? Like not all 50 steps I need to take, but what's the one next thing? And how do each of those things support that? And I noticed as I'm making the choice, there's some fear about what it might mean to let go of one of them and how I feel that might limit me. And so then I have to then orient to, well, do I want to be a person who is driven by fear, or do I want to be a person that is oriented to possibility and my capacity to handle what's next and the ability to make space for what I might not be able to see yet? And how does that then shape how I relate to these two potential choices in front of me? Right. So that's a little bit of the conversation I've been having, which, began with just noticing how I was responding to, is there even a choice? Maybe there is a choice. And how do I feel about noticing, oh, there's some constriction and I'm feeling some resentment, some fear, some constriction. So just noticing all of that and allowing myself to process or to be with those feelings and get curious about what might that mean for me. Right? What is your experience, Ellen?
Well, before we jump, so what I'm kind of pulling from my experience from yours into mine is that you have a decision to make and it's not clear. And you have inner conflict because you're like, I don't know which to choose. And then you're starting to go inside with kind of your internal criteria that you've already built. You have your vision of being a masterful coach. You have the idea that you can sit with the discomfort and to discover oh, what is am I being what are your motivations? Am I being motivated by fear? So it's looking at when anyone, I'm bringing this to how can we all apply this to our lives? It's you have a decision, it's hard to make. And usually if a decision is hard to make, there's something there, right, that needs a little look-see. And it's to go into, so you were focused, if we could go back to kind of categorize some of so what matters most to you in this situation? You kind of went the long term, what matters most to you in the long term? What does that mean in the short term? And then I like this sitting, we've also talked about in previous episodes, sitting with discomfort. We've covered it a couple times, sometimes deeper than others, but it is such an important piece to all of this, all of life, this meaning life, because we're uncomfortable. And that's exactly where you need to turn in instead of turn away, I think, is where the magic happens, is turning towards that fear. Because then you're noticing what's my underlying motivation. In coach language, we talk about that you either have aversions or attractions, naturally embedded in your psyche. So which ones are motivating you? And to make sure that you're being motivated by the ones you want, I think is where you were that introspection that you're talking about, is to be I don't want to be motivated by fear. I want to be motivated by my long-term vision. So that's going to help me make this decision.
Yeah.
And then I also think this decision, are you ever, and this relates to what I was talking about with time management with clients, that they have to say no to things or yes to things, and they have too many things on their plate, is this idea that we should at some point come to some place where we're completely satisfied with a choice, where maybe you'll always, if you choose to move forward and you have to choose and you have to let one go, and you're going to let one go and move forward, maybe you won't be at peace. Maybe you'll still have a little, is our expectation that we need to be completely peaceful with all of our choices?
I think that's a great question, because I think that there is on one level, there is an expectation of that. And I've seen in the past how sometimes what I notice is, I think when I get into fear about what the future holds, then I start to become judgmental about choices that I've made in the past.
Okay.
When I'm not orienting that way, I do feel more at peace with the choices that I've made. And so I think it's a valid question, and I'm not sure if we do always have to feel completely at peace. And my experience is that as things play out and I see that it feels to me like there's value in the choice that I made or the path that I'm now on because of it, I tend to feel more peace around it.
Mm-hmm.
What are your thoughts about that? Because this is one I hadn't thought about, and I'm now pretty curious.
Yeah. I'm thinking about the work I do with clients to make confident decisions.
Yeah.
Because confidence is one of the things a lot of people want to touch on in coaching.
Yeah.
And confidence isn't just, walking around and feeling confident. Likely it's usually confidence in the decisions you're making, whether it's the decision to talk or the decision to not talk, the decision to how you represent yourself, all those teeny micro decisions. So it's like, how do you build confidence? And I think in that work I do is informed by having your vision or what you're committed to. Like you were saying, you're committed to becoming like a masterful coach. And so if between these two choices, this one is going to really help you become a masterful coach, even though the other one could have, but maybe not as strongly, that will help build your confidence that you made a right decision. Like quote, can't see me, I'm holding up air quotes, right decision. Because we never really know all the time, but it's like, how can you build your confidence that you are going to like this decision and not regret it?
Yeah. And I wonder, this might be getting a little too off topic, but I also wonder if that's a choice. Like, how much is that a choice? Like, I've noticed that as I choose to see things as being supportive of me or the right choice, it also, whether or not, because here's the reality. We can never know for sure if it was, because we can never know what would have happened if we made the other choice. Yeah. And so I think there's a choice to be made there too, is, do I want to see this as having been the right air quote choice, or the choice that supported my growth or what I needed right now, or, the next step for where I'm trying to go? Or do I want to choose to live in regret or always looking backwards at what if, which is all just imagination?
Yeah. Second guessing, self-doubt, the inner critic coming up, being like, what if? So if we bring presence into this, that this is something else that's really been on my mind a lot lately, after I heard something that 80% of the thoughts we think we've already thought before. And so then I started watching my own thoughts when I heard that a few weeks ago on a podcast. I started watching my own thoughts. I'm like, oh, thought that one before. And as soon as I would identify one I thought before, I would stop. And I would refocus on the present moment. And then I would do it again. And I've been catching myself. But I've noticed that idea, a lot of it is that means we're living in the past or in the future, right? We're either imagining a conversation we're going to have or something that's going to happen, or we're rehashing what has already happened and what we could have done or whatever. So all that 80% of the rethinking of thoughts, and maybe a percentage of the other 20%, is about the past and the future. And when you're thinking about those things, you're not in the present. And I am personally, now that I have been working on presence and practicing presence, front top of mind for over 3 years, I can 100% say I'm happier in the present than I am when I'm more satisfied. I feel more fulfilled. I feel more content. I feel more at peace. Even if something is sad or I'm having a hard time with something, I feel like I like my life better when I'm in the present moment.
Yeah, I will second that strongly. And I will say, I think that's an important thing that you mentioned is, yes, we all still experience like I just said, there was some frustration or anger around my initial impulse with this particular thing I'm talking about.
The choice you had to make? Yeah.
Yeah, there's profound sadness that I experienced, but I've noticed, like you, my ability to be present with it, to be right here in this moment and experiencing it and allowing it.
Mm-hmm.
I feel so much more space within, and there's room for there also to be joy or contentment or self-compassion along with the hard thing. So, yeah.
Yeah. And in that spaciousness, I mean, just that idea of like, I feel that too in the present moment, more spaciousness around whatever it is I'm struggling with or whatever it is I'm enjoying. But I think that's what is like, is that the magic window or door that then is open for new awarenesses to arise and to, because that's when I think about like what matters most. Like that's what we touched on this a little bit in this decision, your decision, and then how do we make confident decisions in general is like going back, like what matters most to us in this moment is the place to start, I think. And then thinking about what matters most in terms of what the decision and the impact and, whatnot, but what matters most to you in it. And I feel like when you're in the present moment, there's space for that. And if you're like thinking about, the future, thinking about the past, there's not space for you to sit and be like, well, what does matter most here? And actually get in touch with it and then focus on it and make your decision motivated by what matters most rather than motivated by like, that fear or worry.
Well, it makes sense
if you weren't in the present moment. Like, are those connected? Like, is fear and worry like connected to backwards thinking or forward thinking?
I think that they are, because I think you're trying to protect yourself. If I could replay this 1,000 times in my mind and figure out all the ways that it could have gone wrong, or that I might be able to respond perfectly the next time to avoid whatever negative outcome or experience that I've had. And I think then you're so focused on this one thing that it's difficult for any other possibility to be visible to you, right? So you might be thinking, oh, I'm choosing between these two things. And what you don't realize is there's this whole other thing that you can't even see off to the side, that if you could just let go of your tight grip of these two things and create a little like breathing room, your brain starts to get a little more creative, or for me, what it feels like is a sense of trust. Like just trusting in I guess at a fundamental level, it's trusting in my capacity to handle whatever comes. And so the way that I orient to it is that I trust that the right things will present themselves, or that I'll find the path, the thing that I need most will appear or present itself or become available to me. And I've seen that happen a number of times in not only my own life, but in other friends and, clients' lives. But it does require me letting go of that tight grip and that constant repetitive thought loop that's attached to the fears and the anxieties.
Which pulls you out of the present moment. So then if you can at least get yourself in the present moment, you'll have a little bit more clarity, period.
Yeah.
Versus, I mean, I think everyone can relate to that worry and that, like circulative narratives I think about in my head. And now that I've been watching my thoughts for that 80% of repetitive thoughts, where I'm like, oh, wow. So now when I hear them, I'm like, why am I still thinking about that? Like, why is that the thing that's like, like I had a conversation with a neighbor the other day, and that keeps coming into my head as if I'm like replaying it. I'm like, why did that matter so much to me? So then I'm thinking more about like, what was it and how I showed up that is in an inner conflict with maybe I didn't show up the way I wanted to. So what does that mean? Can I call them now and say something so then I feel like I'm more in alignment with whatever, that I'm not feeling good about it? Or, how can I change that in the future? Oh gosh, I just had a thought about, and it just escaped me, but it was about making confident decisions. It's about what matters. Oh, it's about de-risking the decisions. So when you're talking about trust, because a lot of times I can speak for myself, I'm seeing like a few decisions, and when I feel like really worked up about it, if I can't make a decision and I feel very worked up, it's usually that I am assigning or my nervous system is assigning the situation is very high risk, like high stakes. The outcome is high stakes. So one of the things I like doing, and I do this a lot with clients too, is like, let's look at the stakes. Like if we came into the present moment, really looked at this decision, how high stakes would it be? In terms of trusting that it's going to be okay. And to be able to have that inner trust is like, how can you lower the stakes? So I'm wondering though, in yours, because this seemed like it was a little like me, like what would you rate the stakes? Because it seems more than just a little thing for you.
I think the initial stakes, they felt very high initially. And part of that was because I was attaching, it wasn't just what's going to serve me best in this moment, but my fears about my vision for what I think that I want the future to look like, or what action steps I might need to take next, and how these two choices might play into that, and my fear about what it will mean to let go of one of them. And so there's kind of I see it as sort of a competing, one of them maybe better serves this step, and the other might potentially serve the next step. And I'd been orienting to, it does serve the next step. And so I can't let go of it. Even though this other one is the thing that would serve this step that I'm in. And so I had this battle between being with the present moment and projecting into the future what I think is going to be the better choice. And so it felt very high stakes because it was pitting the immediate need against the perceived projected future need. And so, so that's a good point, as I had to come to recognize my own thought pattern around the belief that I can predict the future and that I know what I will need and what will be most helpful to me when I get there, and recognizing that that's not necessarily true. And there might be some other thing that I can't even see yet because I haven't grown to meet it. And so from that perspective, the stakes already are kind of lower, like, oh, there's more possibility than I'm giving credit to. And I'm also choosing in the fear place to believe that if I let go of this thing right now, I can never have it again, which is also true. Not necessarily. It might be true, but it's not knowably true. And there's a chance that it's not true. And
so did that help lower the stakes too?
Absolutely. So all of those things. So just recognizing how I was positioning and the level of stakes that I had tied up into it, for sure. And recognizing the distinction, I think, specifically between what is present and what is projected was really helpful.
Yeah. And so the takeaway from that would be, if you want to make a confident decision, we were talking about trust, but really it's how can you lower the stakes on the decision that you're making? Is it as high stakes as you think? What can you do? Especially, so not just coming into the present moment, but I think we also talked on what we were touching on without explicitly saying it was to get a little bit more resourced. So like if you're in protection fear mode, you're shut down to possibility. Your brain is literally constricted and shut down. And so if you give yourself a little bit of space, whether it's in the present moment, you can feel a little bit more space, but how can you get a little bit more space from the decision for a little bit to get more perspective? So it's like time can give you perspective. If a walk outside can give you perspective. Perspective shifts in coaching, Rosela and I were talking about before we turned on the recording, are a common part of working with clients. Like that is if you feel stuck, it's like, let's try some different perspectives. It's just a common coaching tool for anyone to use any day of the week, any minute of the day. So let's see what perspective shifts that you had in there. I mean, you shifted from fear to, not fear. I don't know how you describe that.
I think I just would describe it as trust. Yeah. Okay. And
So you shifted from fear to trust. You shifted from these decisions, and you lowered the risk on them. So that like from high risk to low risk shifted your perspective. You we're talking about what matters most to you, your vision of like, I want to be a masterful coach. And then like you had a secondary question, you're like, and what does that mean for me? And how does this inform that step? So you brought that from a perspective shift from this is what I want out here to this is what is the next, the short-term versus long-term kind of thing.
Yeah. So shifting from strictly present focus from future focus to back to present focus.
Yeah. What other perspective shifts? Oh, no, go ahead.
I was just going to say, trusting that what I'm doing now will serve that bigger vision and the future.
Yeah. Yeah. One other perspective shift that I talked about earlier when we were chatting that I want to bring in right now is a time shift and something that I've been working with in terms of like, so I was just on this vacation in Mexico and I did a shift to help like me change my mood and my attitude because I went like, I'm calling it no regrets and it's specifically to help me change my mood when it's really hard for me. So, and it's just another perspective shift that I think that maybe we could bring in for your situation too. So I was in Mexico recently at an all-inclusive resort with my family, my 2 kids and my partner. And, it's wonderful. Everything's included. So you have drinks and tons of food and it's beautiful and pools and beaches. And, it's like, why would you want to leave? But I wanted to leave. I had set in my mind that when we went down there for a week that we were going to leave and we were going to go see these Mayan ruins because I've already been down there and seen it. And I want to take my kids to have these experiences. So I want to do Mayan ruins. I want to do these cenotes. I wanted to like get out of the resort so they could actually see some of the small towns and, more of what it looks like around outside of the resort. And 2 different days, almost in a row, we wasted like 3 hours each morning. The first one, we were going to rent a car so we could go. 3 hours in, the rental car place, their website broke, couldn't get it, so we couldn't leave. And I was like in a horrible mood. And I was like, okay, I can rebound from this. Like, I'll have some other options. So then I decided to book, I was down then, but then I decided to book an excursion where we all forego on a little tour bus and they take us somewhere. I was like, if that's my only option, that's what I'm going to do. And then, so I pay for it. We get up again, 3 hours in from getting up super in the morning and waiting in the front, like lobby. And then they say to me, your name isn't on the list. Like something happened and like whoever you paid the money to didn't get your name like through the computer system. So then we were just like stuck and it was the last day we were there and I was so upset that like but it was out of my control, but I was just like, okay, that rental car company and now this tour company and like, don't they, like in my head, I'm like, we need to get out of here. And I was so upset. And for a little while I was like really angry and kind of huffing around. So I'm like, fine, we'll go sit by the pool. And then I'm kind of like this dark cloud, right? And my kids, like, they don't know what they're missing. So they just jump in the pool and they're having fun and whatever. And then I'm just going to take a walk. So I just walked on the beach a little bit and I thought to myself, how do I want to look back on this day? Like when I am done with this vacation and I'm back at work and I'm back in like cold Minnesota and I'm like, like back in my day to day, like, do I want to look back at my vacation and think like, oh, I spent 1 day out of 7 completely pissed and like miserable. And so I said to myself, no regrets. Like, you got to change this mind. So this perspective shift of like looking, like, how do I want to look back at this is the perspective shift. And you can fast forward. So if anyone right now listening to this has something you're deciding between, should I do this or should I do this? Think about like 1 week from now when you look back at this day, or 1 year from now. Sometimes the longer time frame can give you more information to look back on this day. And would you regret it?
Yeah, I think that's an important distinction, is that time, and it can be as much as just taking a couple minutes or a couple hours, weeks to think about what you're doing, or also projecting like in a year, how much will this matter? What will matter about this? I think another thing that you're doing here is orienting around your values of how do I want to show up? Who do I want to be in this moment? What's important to me about not just what I value in the world, but how I am being in the world, right? What experiences am I creating for myself? And I think that's an important distinction as well, a shift of, can I relate to my values as opposed to my reactive habit
Yeah.
nature.
Yeah. And
Right?
you want to know what I've been orienting to lately? Because this informs it.
Sure.
Because I did the same thing about like what matters most to me.
Mhm.
And every morning I'm asking myself, how can I make this a day that I love?
What a great question.
Because I want to love my life. Like that's one of the things that like this year I'm like, you know, I work with people on fulfillment and how do they define their own vision of success and what do people want? And, you know, and forever, like my words are freedom, growth, and joy. Like those are the things I'm oriented to. But I was like, what does it really come down to? And it's this big question of like, what's life about? Like, what is life about? And it's a personal question, right? Like, so what is life about? And I answered it. I want to have a life I love. And I want that to motivate my behaviors, my decisions, you know, all of the things that I'm doing in the world and how I show up. And so now I'm starting to ask myself that every morning of like, how do I make this a day? Because there was an old phrase, a joyful life is just a series of joyful moments.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm thinking about like, if I want a life I love, how can I love today? Or how can I love this hour? Or how can I love this minute? And a lot of it is becoming present and actually enjoying my life and being present to my life to enjoy it. And that's what I was experiencing that day in Mexico. And I was like, no regrets. I'm like, if I want to create a life I love,
then you have to create it.
Then right? I have to be it. You know, like if I looked back on that day, I would not be creating a life that I loved if I spent the whole day kind of slightly pissed, you know, and taking it out on everyone around me.
Yeah. Good point. I kind of want to go maybe circle back around a little bit because we're talking about all of the, I think on a cognitive level, how we relate to orienting so that we can make the right choices. And I think we touched on this a little at the beginning, but I'd like to go a little more deeper on this idea that you and I have talked about before about knowing in your body, knowing like what a whole body yes feels like. What does a no feel like? How do you know other than, because I think a lot of us can say, okay, well, I have these values or I have this vision and both of these things serve it. And now I don't know. Like, I really don't know. Both of them feel important and in service of the things that I care about. And so now how do I decide?
I love that. So the yes and no in your body is so important. And I think it's one thing when I first heard of that concept, I was like, oh, of course we have yes and no's in our bodies. Like, of course I can be like yes or no to something because I'm very definitive in how I think about the world. That's what I thought when I first heard it. And then I was actually walked through more of an exercise of like, what does yes feel like in your body and what does no feel like in your body? And I think that was my first kind of doorway into even sensing my body. That I felt like I had a general sense of my body before then. But when we were like, oh, you're going to be a somatic coach. And I was like, woo, what does that mean? You know, like, how do you get it? How do you guide people into their bodies? You know, it seemed I don't know. It seemed like out there in terms of like, how do we do this? But it's so real and it's so present for all of us. And because we've all had a yes and we've all had a no. And we have them all day, every day. But it's like no one has ever taught us how to cue into it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I noticed for myself, it took conscious awareness because I think I was just so used to overriding that impulse with my cognition about what I think I should do. Not even necessarily what I want to do, but what I think I should do. So I don't know if you have a specific doorway in that maybe in a couple minutes might help people tap in that you want to share?
I have a couple simple ones for both. But first, that should thing, okay, that's like, I think we've talked about this before. That's like a red flag for anything you're doing. If a should is motivating your behavior, that's a good time to come present, give yourself some space, think about what matters most. Because those shoulds running our lives usually don't lead us to a life where we feel fulfilled.
Yeah.
And that's like what we're centering around here. I just want to explicitly say that is that, you know, like what's the point of becoming present? And it's like, making decisions in your own interest? Like, is that?
Yeah, I think it's, for me, I talk about it as being more in alignment. And what I think I'm trying to say is in alignment with your values or what matters to you. And this is a bigger and more nuanced conversation, but that maybe we'll have it in the future. But I think also just teasing out what does actually matter to me versus what have I been taught should matter because that's what my family values or that's what my culture values. And how much of those things do I want to take on as my own values and how much am I not, is it not aligned with like my personhood, my individual unique beingness?
Yeah, that is a great invitation to extend, to use this yes and no feeling in your body that I'm going to walk everybody through right now, this is a perfect time to bring it in, is when you do kind of hear some shoulds, to try and be like, is that me or is that just what I've been taught? Because usually that internal feeling, so I'll just go into it. So for the yes, for both of these, I say, think of a time. So think of a time in your experience where it was like kind of like a hell yes to you, which I'll use a phrase from another coaching friend of mine. She coaches people into their hell yeses. But that phrase is to really get at, like, when did you feel like, yes, like I either love this, either it's something that you were doing like a passion project and you were into it. Or oftentimes, like I found it in nature when I'm like looking at, like I hiked up somewhere and I'm looking at a view and I'm like, like, yes, like you feel this expansion in your chest. It's usually very similar. People feel, of course, like nuanced, but it's related to an expansive feeling where you feel like, and you can kind of like breathe, like usually you do take a deep breath or you do breathe more. So think of an experience you've had in your life. It could be when you were 7 years old riding a bicycle. It could be, last week if you were, had some experience. So like think all the way back in your life. And if everyone listening right now, just bring something to mind, bring an experience to mind. And if it helps, close your eyes if you're able to do so. And relive the experience as if it's happening right now by trying to imagine, what did you see? What did you hear? What are the smells? Because your mind doesn't know really what's real. If you're remembering something, you have the same body memory of it. And just like take a breath into that and feel into your body. What does your yes feel like? Like that was a yes for you. And what does that feel like? Can you describe, Rosela, what it feels like for you?
The yes feels, like you said, it's expansive. I feel a settling, like a grounded feeling, more spacious in my body, there's more ease to it. Just like settled more. I want to say relaxed, but it's not always relaxed, like low energy, because sometimes there's some excitement or movement in there too. But more in my body, less in my head, I'll say. There's not a lot of frenetic spinning up here.
Yeah.
It's just more still.
Nice. I was thinking of when since I used the example of riding a bike, I was thinking of that it's just like freedom kind of. And like my body's really loose. And, like if you're riding a bike and you're a kid and you're just pedaling and everything you don't even think that you're exercising. You're just like moving your body and it feels really good. And like no thoughts in my head and really like expansive. So that's a yes. So just start paying attention now. If you have your yes or think about like Rosela was talking about, how does your mind feel? How does like your chest feel? Do you feel your feet? Thoughts, if anything comes up. So then if you're just,
before you move on to the no, can I add one tiny thing for people that maybe, because I'm one of them, struggle to have a specific memory? I'm going to offer one suggestion is think about maybe your very favorite food in the world or there's something that you really enjoy looking at, experiencing. If there's a bird that delights you or a flower, something that feels beautiful and delightful to you, and bring that to mind. And that might have a similar experience, I think.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sorry
Thanks
for that
for that
disruption.
Yeah, no. That's great. I think the more examples, obviously, the better for everyone, because it's so different for everybody. And it is like a feeling into, you know, like sometimes you can't think of a memory because you feel really closed off. So maybe this is like you're getting just a taste of it. And that's maybe how it was for me in the very beginning, even when I had like exercises like this, that I could get a taste of it. And then I started paying attention to like the next time I did go hiking and was at a yes, I was like, oh, this is a yes. So like pay attention for the rest of your, if you're listening to this, the rest of the day, your week, the month, like pay attention to where you feel yeses. You know, and it says, and you can look for yeses when you're like deciding between like two restaurants, like where do we want to eat for dinner, or what do I want to eat for dinner at home? Is you can feel like that's where you can start playing with these yes and no's. So it's funny that you brought up your favorite food, Rosela, for the yes, because my no guided, is think of your least favorite food.
Okay.
Imagine that everyone bring your least favorite food to mind. And now imagine you're sitting in a restaurant and you're having a nice dinner, whoever you're sitting across from, and the server comes over and puts a plate down in front of you, and their server's very busy, and they just drop it and they walk away before you have a chance to say anything. And you look down and that plate of food is filled with your least favorite food. And the waitress is gone and she is not coming back, and you are just like stuck, like you're hungry. You're sitting there looking at this food that you really don't like. And then now turn into your body and feel how your body feels. Like, is there constriction in your face? Is there any in your what's happening in your breathing? Pay attention to your gut in a no. Do you want to describe yours? A little scan?
So I'll say I modified that prompt a little bit again, just because for me, even my least favorite food maybe isn't, like I might eat it if I'm starving. So I thought, what if it was a plate full of live bugs? Or something really that would really horrify me. And I could immediately feel my face scrunch up into like a disgust face. My chest closed down, my breathing got shallow, like every part of me, like my core sort of cinched itself in. Like it felt like there was a corset from inside. Happening is what I felt. Like even my feet, sort of my arches kind of came up, and like my whole body just kind of like a whole body pucker, I think is what I felt.
So with the nose, it's always a constriction of some sort, but depending on the person, some people constrict different parts of their body. So it's like getting to know, like reading your own tea leaves for your yes and your no's. Because like I get the furrowed brow and a clenched gut, and I hold my breath. And oftentimes I just noticed this, like in the last few months, my hands and my feet get really tight and I don't even notice. So those can be some signs of no's.
Yeah.
And it's just playing with it, right? It's like just paying attention, like, oh, what's my yes and my no? And then seeing the nuances, testing it out on things like dinner. Like, do I feel? And so then when bigger decisions come along, like a job, to say yes or no to a job, then you have a bigger sense of yes and no. Like when I have clients that are scanning LinkedIn for jobs, I teach them this yes and no thing before or during when we're talking. So then when they go and scan LinkedIn and are looking at a job description, they can move through faster. They can admit their no's. Be like, yep, this is a no. So just like cut your losses, stop looking at it, move on. Because most of the time we try and fit ourselves like, well, maybe, I don't know. You're trying to keep possibilities open.
Yeah, I think that's an important point. And I think also to recognize that one caveat I want to make on that is to recognize that this is a yes or no right now. Yeah. So for example, for me, one of the two possibilities, like one of the things that I'm facing right now, almost a year ago, I explored this possibility and it was a clear whole body no. And I said, I can't do it. And a year passed, there was some growth there. I'm in a different place. I have a different orientation now. I'm at a different, what I need in my life to continue my development is different. And so as it came up again, it was a very clear whole body yes now. And so that's, I think, important to distinguish that that's a possibility as well.
Yeah. And that's why I think the magic of developing and getting in touch with the yes and no in your body in terms of making confident decision making is so, it's worth your while, I would say, in gold to like get in touch with it, because when those big decisions do come up, like you said, you had a whole body yes. So then it's like,
yeah. And for me, even part of that is it just feels like I tend to have a little bit of a spiritual orientation to the world. And so it almost even feels like a little wink from the universe is how I like to talk about it. When I see things coming around that feel like a yes, it just feels like, oh, this is just being served up on a platter just for you.
You feel in the flow. I mean,
yes,
I really, that's
yes,
how I describe it is like, I just feel like I'm in the flow and I'm like, yes, when hard decisions are easy. Or big decisions are easy. Maybe that's the way to put it.
Yeah.
So we're kind of heading at the end of the hour. Anything else you want to say on this juicy topic that we got into before we move to the meditation?
I always feel like these conversations could go on and on. But I do want to keep to our time and move into a practice. And I want to invite space for our listeners to chime in with their thoughts and experiences and questions about all of this so that we can start to incorporate those things into our conversations. So I'll just leave that invitation open on the table.
And you can do that by commenting or sending us a message, I think, through multiple platforms. You can reach out to us. Our email addresses are in the description too. If you want to drop a note, we would love to hear from you.
Yeah. So as we're moving into our practice, I'm going to just pause for a second and give you an opportunity to check back in. We always do a mood check at the beginning, but I think it's useful to reflect back after some time with some practice or, what's different now, if anything? Where are you? And so maybe just take a moment to notice, where are you with your mood right now? And going into the practice, this feels like it might not feel completely connected in the ways that some have been, but we talked a little bit about perspective shifting today. And so I wanted to do just a brief practice that can allow a version of that. So this is an experiment. We'll see what happens. And yeah, we'll see. That's all I have to say about that. So I'm going to get myself comfortable in my chair, and I'll invite you all to do that as well. This one probably is best done seated or reclined in some way so that you can relax and fully sink into yourself. I'll invite you, if it's comfortable, to go ahead and close your eyes for this one, or at least soften your gaze so that you can really go inward. And bring your attention to your breath. Allowing yourself to sink into your chair, relax back. Allow your breath to deepen just a bit. And as you start to come back into your body and relax into yourself a bit, I'm going to invite you to envision yourself sitting on a rowboat in a beautiful, serene lake with maybe just the mildest of breeze blowing glass-like water. Your favorite trees or flowers surrounding you on the banks. And just notice what the experience of being in this boat is like. What feelings are with you? What sensations are here? What thoughts are coming through your head? can you allow yourself to just notice and let them float through? And I'm going to ask you to bring your attention and your consciousness down through the boat. Imagine that your spirit, your consciousness can drift down through the water, gently floating down, resting in the sand on the bottom of the lake. And from here, you can look up and still see yourself sitting in the boat and watch yourself enjoying the beautiful scenery. And just notice what you experience in this body of consciousness that you're holding here, gently reclined under the water. What is your emotional state? And any thoughts or observations that come floating through your mind? And if you're having difficulty, just imagine what it might be like if you could see this vision playing out. What might that actually look like and feel like? Taking another breath or two here and allowing yourself one more time to drift up and out of that consciousness on the lake bed, floating back up towards the surface and through the surface and even up into the clouds. Noticing that you're still sitting in the boat and you're still lying on the lake bed, and observing what each of those versions of you are doing. Noticing what you can see from this perspective in the clouds that you couldn't see from the lake bed, that you couldn't see from inside the boat. Noticing any feelings, sensations, thoughts that might drift through here. Noticing any difference in the ease with which they might drift through. Noticing that each of these three perspectives is still you, and that each of them offered something different and unique. Allowing yourself another breath or two to be with each perspective and to come back when you're ready into a singular perspective, into this moment, and back to your day. Opening your eyes when you're ready. And continuing from here with whatever serves you from this conversation. With that, we are complete.
Thanks for listening. We want to hear from you. Drop us a comment on what you'd like to hear more about or questions you may have. We value your input and we'll work those topics into future episodes.
If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with others. Like, subscribe, and leave a rating and review. It would go a long way in helping us spread the word about the Presence Hour podcast. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time.